Welcome to the AirBim Double Bimini lift system installation video. In this video, we're going to install the AirBim for the front half of the Double Bimini lift system. Now, to begin with, we want to make sure we've unzipped our Bimini and we've rolled the front Bimini forward, and we have both support arms locked in place on each side. It is very important to have these locked in place or your measurements will be wrong. So make sure you are fully locked in place before you do any measuring or any mounting. All right, our first step on the installation is to get our measurement and the measurement for our lower rail. And what I want to do here is from the center of this mount, I'm going to measure over, and that measurement is 4 3/4. Again, that measurement is 4 3/4. And I'm going to put a line there, and then I'm going to put my gasket on it. I have my gasket on now, but you're not going to have your gasket on. You're going to put a mark at 4 3/4. All right, in this step, we're going to mount the lower AirBim bracket. And to do this, I've kind of got mine mounted up a little bit. But what I want is, I want the edge of my bracket right at the mark where I put my gasket. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to put these together, and I'm going to show you in another clip using a C-clamp to mount these together. The C-clamp's going to go on both sides, and you're going to compress these together, and then you're going to insert your 2 3/4 bolt from the outside and use your nylon lock nut, seat it into the groove, and then you're going to tighten this down. And you're going to tighten that down until the gap closes, and you're going to fully secure and snug it up. Now, you do have to crank it down pretty tight, but again, you don't want to over tighten it as well. But you do want to get it nice and tight, and then we'll be on to our next step. All right, so our next step, we're going to line up our edges here and get them so they're really flush. And now what you'll need is this C-clamp, and I put little pieces of foam on it. And what you want the C-clamp, up a little higher, kind of where I have mine here, just above the rounded edge. And then on this edge, you want it up higher as well. Now, if you notice, that gap is pretty big. And we're going to use the C-clamp, and I'm going to show you what that looks like when it's back together here. So you want the C-clamp kind of high, because if you bring the C-clamp down low, you will not squeeze the top edge. Now, you'll have to forgive me. I've got some nicks and stuff on my bracket, but and the reason I wanted to point that out is those nicks is you want to be careful when you're doing this. Mine, I've dropped off the edge a few times, but I want my C-clamp here, and then I'm just going to turn this in, and that gap is going to come together. Okay, and look at that. That gap is going to come together, and once that gap comes together, I can take my bolt, and from the outside, I can start my bolt on the outside. Show you what I got here, if you can see it. I got my bolt here, and I'm going to start that. Now, the bolt itself, if you don't have it exact and whatever, but you might have to just begin to thread that bolt in, and it will thread in. If you hit it perfectly, it should be able to slide directly in. But if you don't, you can just begin to thread it in a little bit. It shouldn't hurt it at all. And what I'm doing here, once I'm, you're going to take your nut, and then the nut gets seated inside the nut slot on the mount itself. Now I started on this side, so I'm going to put that over there. And I'm just going to turn that bolt in. And then once I get this one started, I'm going to do the next one. And then I can release the C-clamp. And I'll show you what that looks like after. All right, our next step is we're going to mount our top rail bracket. And what we want to do from this weld, we want to measure over 7 3/8. Again, that number 7 3/8. What I did is I put a line at 7 3/8. And now I'm going to take my gasket and I'm going to put the edge of my gasket at that 7 3/8. And my gasket, I want to make sure, you know, this is somewhat equal across here. And you'll notice where I have my gasket, I don't have it wrapped fully around. I want it down about 1/4 inch from this edge, because I want this to come around. I want the top to come around when we put the top piece on. But once I have it there, I can take my lower mount and slide that up. So it's going to look something like that. So now my edge of my mount here is at 7 3/8. And then what we're going to do, and this is the reason I did this, so this gasket flops around and I can put my top plate on. So I'm going to put my top plate on, and then in the next step we'll show you mounting that. All right, our next step is we're going to put our ball studs on. Put the bottom one on, facing the outside, and then you'll put your lock nut on the opposite side, again up here. And I don't have this fully tightened yet, and the reason I don't want to do that just yet is I've just snugged it up. And I want to get a measurement from the center of this ball to the center of this ball stud. And so that's our next step. And that measurement should be 14 1/4 or right around there. You have to be very, very close. You want to be right around 14 1/4 to 14 3/8. Give or take a 1/16 of an inch, because that measurement's important. And then we're on to our next step. All right, our next step, now that I have this measured up, we are going to put our strut on. Before we do that, we could secure the top bolts. So you're going to tighten them in a cross pattern. We're going to start on one corner, tighten it a few turns, come to the opposite corner, a few turns, and we're going to continue back and forth until we compress this, until our gap is compressed down. So what we want to do is we're going to put the gas strut on, and you want the base of it toward the lower end of the rail. And you'll notice up here that I'm far off. I'm about a good 3/4 of an inch off, and that's by design. So now what we want to do is we want to release that, and we're going to overextend your bimini, and we're going to connect that up, and then we can Our next step is we lowered the bimini, and we want to make sure with the bimini lowered that we have a nice gap here. It should be about an 1/8 inch to a 1/4 inch gap, and we just want to make sure this is not shoved into the the base of your piston area. So we have a nice gap there. And once we have that, we can lift it back up and lock in the support arms. So now that we have this side completed, we're going to move over to the other side and we're going to complete the other side. Now again, when you are doing your measurements, make sure that you have your support arms locked in place on both sides before you begin. Otherwise your measurements will be off. Even if you have this side on, you're going to make sure you have that side done. All right, now that we have both sides on, we can allow the AirBim, the front half, to lift the system up. We're going to bring our Bimini back, and then I want to show you this process because the AirBim front half makes this a breeze. So zipping up your zipper is fantastic. Now, because we've overextended it a little bit, all I have to do is come back here and put it in the zipper. And as you can see, you do have to kind of snake around it a little bit. But as you can see, whoa, sorry. But as you can see, that process is now a one-man process. And I've zipped it up. And then when I'm ready to go boating, the AirBim will hold itself here when you're ready to go boating. You always want to make sure you have your support arms locked in place. You notice I'm overextended here a little bit, but that's okay. I'm just going to give it a little down pressure, and I'm going to lock that in. Come over here. You notice I'm overextended. A little bit of down pressure. We're going to lock that in. And what that did is now we have our front Bimini's nice and tight. We can do our straps. Now I want to be sure everybody understands, you must have your support arms both sides locked in place when boating, and you must continue to use the Sea-Doo provided straps. The AirBimini does not take any of that away, although we have noticed that it's sturdied up the front half of the double Bimini a little bit. So again, support arms locked in place. When we're done boating, we are going to, when we're ready to pack up, we're going to go a little bit of down pressure. We're going to release that side. A little bit of down pressure here. We're going to release this side. Now what that does, it takes the tension off, and the zipper is super easy to undo. So the front half of the AirBim Double Front Lift System makes this double Bimini a breeze.